When the Song court was barely lingering under the astonishment of the Jin army, far to the north the scattered Mongol tribes began to unite. A powerful empire was quietly taking shape, just as the far-sighted Shinchiji had foreseen. In the 13th century, this people, with an unstoppable offensive, replaced the Jin and became the greatest enemy of the Southern Song dynasty. As the fierce Mongol armies swept across the vast Eurasian continent, the Song army, often criticized for its weakness, nevertheless built an iron defense line across China. On this Southern Song frontier there stood a tall and imposing general. In the Southern Song, the most renowned commander resisting the Jin was Yue Fei, while against the Yuan, the name of Wen Tianxiang, originally a civil official, became famous. Yet before us stands another figure who held a crucial role among the warriors of Jing and who was invincible at the anti-Mongol front. With his own strength, he commanded 2/3 of the Southern Song frontier. This man was Meng Gong, Lu. Yu's life was long. After the northern expedition of the Kaishi era, Han Tuozhou died, Shinchiji also passed away. He outlived countless enemies and old friends, yet still never saw the unification of the realm. At the age of 85, he died in anguish from fever, while at that time Meng Gong had only just reached manhood. Meng Gong came from a military family. His great-grandfather Meng An and his grandfather Meng Lin both served under Yue Fei. He was the fourth son of the anti-Jin commander Meng Zhong. From youth, Meng Gong and his 3 elder brothers were taken by their father into the army, training together with loyal soldiers. Years of military life not only gave him strong skills, but also a keen strategic insight. In the 6th year of Shaoding, Mongol envoys came to the Southern Song capital Lin'an with news. After capturing Bianjing, the Mongol army forced Jin Aizong Wanyan Shushu to flee with his ministers and troops to take refuge at Guide Prefecture, then Kaizhou. The allied Mongol forces besieged the city for months without success and hoped the Song would send troops to assist. After consultation, Song and Mongols agreed to join forces against the Jin. Once successful, the Jin's former territory of Henan would be divided, the north to the Mongols, the south to the Song. At this time, the Mongols were already so powerful. Did the Song not understand the danger of losing their lips and exposing their teeth? In the past, the northern Song had allied with the Jin to destroy the Liao. After the Liao perished, the Song, left alone, suffered the national catastrophe of extinction. Why then would the Southern Song repeat the peril of Jinkang? In fact, during the previous decade, the Jin borders had been locked in constant war, and internal separatist forces were restless. Facing the powerful Mongols, the Jin were repeatedly defeated. Thus, the Song, long forced to pay tribute to the Jin, seized the chance to stop sending coin. This enraged Jin Xuanzong. After discussion, many Jin generals argued that while their army was weaker than the Mongols, it was still more than sufficient to defeat the Song. Therefore, the Jin court made a startling decision to launch war against the Song. This decision was similar to the strategy of the Zhao state during the Warring States period, which, after failing against Qin, turned to attack Yan instead. The Jin believed that the losses they suffered in the north against the Mongols could be made up by victories in the south against the Song. In the 10th year of Jieding, the Jin launched their war against the Song. At this time, Meng Gong had just come of age and was following his father Meng Zhongzheng on the anti-Jin front. In these campaigns, Meng Gong already displayed extraordinary military ability. When the Jin attacked Xiangyang, he predicted they would first strike the key stronghold of Fancheng. He advised his father to lay ambushes along the Duji River. As expected, the Jin came. The Song army, hidden, attacked as they crossed the river, destroying more than half of the enemy. Later, Meng Zhongzheng was ordered to rescue Zhao Yang. In battle, father and son became separated. From afar, Meng Gong saw a general in white robe on a white horse trapped deep in enemy lines. Shouting, "That is Wu Fu," he immediately led cavalry into the fray to rescue his father. It is worth mentioning that when Meng Zhongzheng served as commander of Jinghu, he had recruited 20,000 strong men from 3 prefectures on the Song-Jin border, forming them into the Shunyi army. After his death, This force came under Meng Gong's command, inheriting the legacy of Yue Fei's army in the early Southern Song. Because of Meng Gong's outstanding performance in the anti-Jin wars, he gradually rose beyond the shadow of his family and elders, becoming a commander in his own right. By this time, the struggle between Song and Jin was nearing its end. After the Battle of Sanfeng Mountain in the 5th year of Xiaoding, most of the Jin's main forces were destroyed by the Mongols. Jin Prince Wanyan Wuxian escaped, then went to the mountains of Nanyang to rally defeated troops, astonishingly gathering over 100,000 men within months. Facing the fall of Bianjing and the collapse of the nation, Wanyan Wuxian decided to risk everything, leading troops southward to open a path of survival. He knew that staying in Kaizhou was not a long-term plan and sought instead to occupy Chuan. Shu could only serve as a base to turn the tide of defeat. To march south into Sichuan and Shu, one had to pass through Jing and Xiang. Meng Gong, stationed in Xiangyang, would never agree. The so-called 200,000 troops, in fact only 5,000, reflected the real condition of the Jin state. The numbers were greatly inflated, and the soldiers were mixed, uneven, and difficult to discipline effectively in a short time, which greatly increased the difficulty of command. Meng Gong had long perceived the internal dangers within Wanyan Wuxian's army. He said to the uneasy Jinghu commissioner Shi Songji, Wanyan Wuxian's forces will certainly attack Luyan. We only need to arrange Mucha Tengyun and Luyan to surround him on 3 sides. With 8,000 men, that is enough to defeat him. As Meng Gong predicted, by taking advantage of the natural terrain, the Song army inflicted a crushing defeat on Wanyan Wuxian's troops. At this time, the Jin army's morale was already low and could not be restored. Moreover, Wanyan Wuxian's beloved general Liu Yiting fell under Meng Gong's strategy. Wanyan Wuxian's forces collapsed in successive defeats, and Wanyan Wuxian himself died while fleeing. From then on, the Jin plan to open a passage into Shu completely failed. After suffering the disasters of the Battle of Sanfeng Mountain and the annihilation of Wanyan Wuxian's army, the Jin state had reached a point of no return. To annihilate Jin in one stroke, the Mongols extended an invitation to the Song to form an alliance. Meng Gong, as one of the main commanders of the Song army, led the garrison of Jing and Xiang onto the road of destroying Jin. Time seemed to repeat itself like a cycle. The tragic fall of a dynasty 107 years earlier was replayed, only this time the Song and Jin had exchanged roles. After arriving in Chaizhou, Meng Gong entered the allied camp and met with Tasha. The Mongols were a people who revered martial prowess. Tasha greatly admired Meng Gong's courage in eliminating Wanyan Wuxian earlier. He invited Meng Gong to hunt and drink together, and in the end, the two even swore brotherhood. After consultation, they decided to surround Kaizhou completely. During this time, Emperor Aizong of Jin attempted to lead troops out from the east gate at night, but was blocked by the Deerhorn barricade set up by the Song and Mongol forces and was forced to retreat after heavy losses. Meng Gong clearly knew that Kaizhou lacked supplies and water. He ordered the Song army to hold grand feasts outside the city, with music, dancing, and banquets. Soldiers cheered, drank, and ate lavishly, while the defending Jin troops inside the city, hearing and seeing this, were driven nearly insane. Meng Gong judged that the time had come, and so the allied forces launched the assault. At this moment, Emperor Aizong no longer wished to flee. He had already fled from Bianjing to Guide, and from Guide again to Kaizhou. Now there was nowhere left to run. He passed the throne to Wanyan Qinglin and said, I entrust the realm to you not out of choice, but necessity. I am obese and cannot ride into battle. If I attempt to flee in an emergency, I cannot escape. You are agile and skillful, with talent and strategy. If by fortune you survive, you may continue the state. This is my wish. Soon after, he took his own life. However, Wanyan Qinglin did not have the chance to escape. He became the emperor with the shortest reign in history. After his enthronement ceremony, barely an hour passed before the Song-Mongol allied forces stormed into the city. Wanyan Qinglin also perished in the chaos. At this point, the Jin dynasty, once the dominant power of the north, was declared extinct. Yet within this war of destruction, the Song and Mongol allies who had supported each other were quietly sowing the seeds of a future confrontation that would engulf the realm. In the later stage of the Mongol-Jin War, the Jin army clung desperately to Tongguan and the Yellow River defense line, resisting the Mongol cavalry under the walls of Diancheng, but for a long time without progress. At this time, whether Mongol, Jin, or even within southern Song itself, it was known that since the Mongols could not break through directly, they were highly likely to use the Song as a path to attack Jin. From the larger perspective, the best strategy for southern Song was secretly to assist Jin in resistance, providing intelligence, some equipment, and grain supplies while maintaining outwardly good relations with the Mongols. At the same time, they had to strengthen military defenses at the Shu passes, absolutely not allowing either Mongol or Jin troops to enter Song border territory. Yet from the emperor of southern Song down to the commanders at the Shu frontier, all were negligent. In the end, this led to the Dinghai incident of 1227 and the Xinmao incident of 1231. In these two battles at the Shu passes, the Mongols did not occupy the cities but withdrew after plundering. However, they achieved their strategic encirclement, gained understanding of Song military strength and the defenses of Shu, and burned the external depots that had accumulated supplies for years. It was clear that within the alliance against Jin, irreconcilable contradictions already existed between Song and Mongols. The campaign of Duanping entering Luoyang became the trigger for these conflicts to erupt. After the fall of Jin, Henan quickly became a vacuum zone. At that time, Emperor Lizong of Song decisively ordered troops into the central plain to recover Dongjing, Kaifeng Prefecture, and to rebuild the defensive line at the rivers and passes. Yet, under years of warfare, the land of Henan was already too exhausted to bear the ambitions of southern Song. The campaign to recover the three capitals consumed vast manpower and resources. Because of the haste of the Song court, the front line soon faced a crisis of depleted supplies and was crushed by the Mongol army. Immersed in the joy of recovering the three capitals, Emperor Lizong of Song was suddenly devastated when news of the defeat at Luoyang reached him. The southern Song court became uncertain about how to act toward the Mongols, and when asked about an alliance with them, Meng Gong replied with firm words, "I am but a soldier. To prolong war is right, but to rely on peace is wrong." In light of the lesson of the Song-Jin alliance and the Mongol advance to the south, the Song court also realized that war with the Mongols was in essence unavoidable. Thus, Meng Gong was sent to Huangzhou to organize frontier defenses. When the Song-Mongol War formally broke out, the Mongol armies advanced in three main directions, toward Shu Pass, Jingxiang, and the Huaihan region. By the year 1236, the Allied forces had already broken through at Xiangyang, Suizhou, Yingzhou, Jingmen, Zhaoyang, and De'an Prefecture. The entire Jinghu defense line of the southern Song was riddled with holes. At that moment, Qizhou too was about to face the Mongol onslaught. Emperor Lizong ordered Meng Gong, then stationed at Huangzhou, to rush to its aid. The commander of the Mongol army was Tashar, once Meng Gong's comrade in battle. Knowing well Meng Gong's exceptional intelligence, he wished to avoid direct entanglement with him. As soon as Meng Gong arrived, Tashar withdrew his forces and turned instead to attack Jiangling. Jiangling was a key fortress on the middle Yangtze. After the fall of Xiangyang, the Jinghu command had been moved there. If the Mongols took Jiangling, they could push west into Shu, advance east along the Yangtze, or go south into Hunan. The consequences would be disastrous. To cross the river, the Mongols constructed rafts at Zhejiang. Facing overwhelming pressure, Meng Gong concentrated his forces to block the river. Then he employed clever stratagems, feigning great numbers. By day, he constantly changed banners and uniforms. By night, he set fires along dozens of miles to simulate vast armies. Unsure of the truth, the Mongols panicked. Seizing the chance, Meng Gong ordered a sudden strike, defeating the enemy in 24 engagements, rescuing over 20,000 captured civilians and burning all the Mongol rafts. The Mongol offensive was halted, and they had no choice but to withdraw. With this victory, Meng Gong turned the tide in the middle Yangtze. The Mongols then shifted their attack to Huai West. Ironically, their target was Huangzhou, where Meng Gong had earlier been assigned to strengthen defenses. One of the Mongol leaders was Zhang Ru, whose life had once been saved by Meng Gong in the anti-Jin campaigns. The broad river in front of Huangzhou provided a natural crossing point, making it the Mongols' priority. Yet they did not know that during his time in Huangzhou, Meng Gong had rebuilt the city walls, dug moats, stationed troops securely, recruited settlers, and cultivated the land to calm the people. This not only strengthened Huangzhou's defenses but also rallied both soldiers and civilians. With Meng Gong's arrival, morale soared. To disrupt the Mongol siege, Meng Gong ordered Liu Quan and others to divide into 7 detachments and launch night raids. Except for Zhang Ru's well-prepared defense, which thwarted one raid, the other 6 were successful, throwing the Mongol camps into chaos. After regrouping, the Mongols launched relentless assaults day and night. Their artillery bombardments burned down all the towers on the walls. Yet Meng Gong remained calm, organizing repair teams to patrol and rebuild, preventing the enemy from breaching. The Mongols then dug through the walls, hoping to break into Huangzhou. But Meng Gong had foreseen this. Inside the wall, he reinforced the structure and dug huge pits called 10,000-man pits. When the Mongols broke through, they found a new wall before them and underfoot the pits. The unprepared vanguard, pushed forward by the rear ranks, fell in and were crushed by rocks hurled by the Song. The Mongols suffered terrible losses and could no longer fight. Defeated, they withdrew in frustration. Meng Gong then recovered the Xiangfan region, forming a central guard from the troops of Kaishi and a vanguard from the defectors of Xiang and Ying, reinforcing Xiangyang's strength. The city gradually revived and again became a military stronghold. When the Jinghu front stabilized, Meng Gong was urgently ordered to Sichuan at the upper reaches of the Yangtze. In the 3rd year of Jiaxi, the Mongol general Tahai led a force claiming 800,000 men, invading Sichuan once more. They swiftly advanced into eastern Sichuan, capturing Kaizhou and reaching Wanzhou on the north bank of the Yangtze. The Mongols feigned a great crossing at Wanzhou by lining up many boats, while ordering Wang Shixian to ambush upstream. The next day, the Mongols attempted to cross. The Song Navy deployed hundreds of warships to resist, but Wang Shixian's ambush troops rowed small boats directly into the Song fleet, routing them. The Mongols pursued to the strategic city of Guizhou. Facing an enemy with overwhelming numbers, Meng Gong understood he could not recklessly divide his forces. He had to find the right ground to defend. He judged with precision that the main Mongol force under Wang's command would take the route through Xi. Thus, troops of 2,000 were stationed in Xiazhou, with another 1,000 garrisoned in Guizhou, and part of the force was sent to reinforce the important Aiku military governor's office in Guizhou. Meng Ying led 5,000 elite soldiers stationed at Songzi as a reserve force, while Meng Zhang commanded 2,000 elite troops defending Lizhou against the Mongol army that had advanced weeks earlier. Meng Gong's defensive system was arranged with interlocking positions, mutually supporting each other. On the southern front at Shizhou, the allied forces were defeated at Qingping by Meng Jing's general Liu Yi. At the great fortress of Daya in western Guizhou, Meng Jing himself won a major victory after a fierce battle. The allied army, routed and in disarray, retreated to Guizhou. When Meng Gong reached the front, Guizhou had already been recaptured. Under Meng Gong's command, the early stages of the Song-Mongol War were marked by back-and-forth struggles. On the front line, he worked with utmost diligence. Yet the great Confucian Wei Liaoweng in the capital judged Meng Gong as a man inclined toward compromise and reconciliation. Thus, the very man who had built the Song's anti-Mongol defensive line was unfairly branded by some as a peacemonger, leaving his name under a cloud. In his later years, he faced constant constraints, gradually growing weary of service and repeatedly requested to retire. In 1246, Fan Yongji, Once a general of the Northern Defense Army of Southern Song and then serving as a provincial governor under the Mongols in Henan, even secretly approached Meng Gong to surrender. However, Emperor Lizong of Song rejected Meng Gong's proposal on the grounds that Fan Yongji's submission was unreliable. Hearing this, Meng Gong grew deeply disheartened, sighing, 30 years striving to recover the central plain, yet the hearts of men today can no longer be trusted. He soon fell into illness of the spirit, resigned, and in September of the same year died in Jiangling. For Southern Song, Meng Gong was not only a great general in his lifetime, but his contributions to frontier fortifications continued to play a vital role in the later Song-Mongol standoff. He had always insisted on consolidating the Jing and Shang defenses, sharply pointing out that Zhangfan was the foundation of the dynasty. Only more than 30 years later, when Xiangyang fell, did the Song rapidly collapse. It is worth noting that though Meng Gong spent his life in arms, he was also versed in Buddhism and Confucianism, advocating benevolence and virtue. When he once visited Emperor Lizong of Song and pressed firmly for war, he did not first speak of how to fight the enemy, but of allowing the people to recover, nurturing talent for the court. It was this humanity and righteousness that made a poignant coincidence. During the Allied campaign to destroy Jin, Meng Gong stood on the battlefield disregarding his own safety, waiting under the burning sun with an impassive face as sweat evaporated from his scalding armor. The cold gleam of blades reflected dazzling light. Other than the occasional uneasy snort of the warhorses, the entire army remained in suffocating silence. At the front, the commander high on horseback gazed northward, his expression gradually turning grim. At the far end of his sight, the thunder of hooves rolled closer. Like a tide, the armored Jin cavalry surged southward toward Lingbi, engulfed in dust. Slowly, long sabers slid from their scabbards. Behind him, a great black banner suddenly unfurled in the wind, its blood-red field emblazoned with a single massive character. Raising his saber, the man cried out, "Today we fight the enemy in blood. Better to die north of Lingbi, defending to the death beyond the southern gate." Yanba spurred his horse forward at full gallop, shouting, "Better to die north of Lingbi, not live beyond the southern gate." Behind him, more than 400 riders instantly surged ahead, like a lone skiff against stormy waves, like swordsmen rushing out against the tempest, colliding headlong with Jin cavalry 10 times their number. In 1206, during the Kaishi Northern Expedition of Southern Song, as the army fled in defeat from Suzhou, the renowned general Zaiyu, commanding the rearguard, with only 480 horsemen, fought a desperate battle at Phoenix Mountain near Lingbi, utterly defeating 5,000 Jurchen pursuers. Southern Song was an age of great generals. In its 152 years of history, it constantly faced danger from powerful nomadic nations such as the Jurchens and the Mongols. This environment not only sparked continual wars, but also cultivated a host of extraordinary martial talents. The opening peak of this legacy was Yue Fei, the god of war who served the country with utmost loyalty. Its closing climax was Meng Gong, who prolonged the dynasty's survival for decades. Between them were countless other names that burn with passion in history's firmament. Han Shizhong, who with 8,000 troops besieged an army of 100,000. Wu Ji, whose family defended Sichuan through 3 battles and secured a century of peace. Yu Yunwen, the scholar general who led the army at Kaishi and smashed 400,000 elite troops. Wang Jian, who with the tiny fortress of Diaoyu City blocked the Mongols for 36 years. Yet among these brilliant commanders, Zaiyu may not have been as well known, but judged by real strength and achievements, from the victory at Longxing and Haida in 1164 to the failed northern expedition of 1207 across nearly half a century in the mid-southern Song, perhaps only he alone held such a position. Zaiyu's ancestral home was in Yanzhou. He was born in Lin'an. His father, Jing, during the Jianyan reign, followed Yue Fei in defending the capital Bianliang and fought across Jiangwei, repeatedly achieving distinction, rising to the rank of Wei Dafu. It seemed as if fate had arranged it. For Zai유's father Bijing and Meng Gong's grandfather Meng Lin had both once been members of Yue Fei's army, though in different periods of Southern Song history. The three most outstanding and representative generals were linked through the Yue family army, achieving a great inheritance of bloodlines of famous commanders across a century. From youth, Zaiyu showed the talent and potential of a brilliant general. Historical records describe him as imposing in appearance, with superb martial skill, able to draw a bow with a strength of 2 dan and 7 dao. Even compared to Yue Fei, who could bend a hard bow of 300 jin, Zaiyu was only slightly inferior. Within the Southern Song army, this was already the highest level of combat power. In his youth, Zaiyu was summoned before Emperor Shaozong. His skill in archery amazed those present, and the emperor greatly praised his talent, rewarding him with robes and money as encouragement. Yet, after gaining imperial favor, the long peace of 40 years between the Southern Song and Jin gave him no chance to display his military prowess. By the time the flames of war between Song and Jin flared again, when Zaiyu could finally gallop on the battlefield, the once spirited young swordsman had already become a grey-haired elder in his 60s. For ordinary men, such an age was already the twilight of life, content only to pass the days in peace. Even with loyalty in their hearts, they would hardly be able to rouse themselves. But as the saying goes, true heroes show their nature in the storms of the sea. Though in his later years, Zaiyu still carried great ambition, writing with bold strokes a series of battlefield miracles that inspired awe. In the last decade of his life, he revealed the extraordinary style of the foremost general of the mid-Southern Song. In the second year of Kaishi, in the 5th month, Han Tuojo led the full-scale counterattack against the Jin, known in history as the Kaishi Northern Expedition. This campaign was divided into 3 main fronts. The eastern route was the Song main force, departing from the Liangwei front toward Shuzhou and Bozhou. The central route advanced north from Jingxiang battlefield, aiming for Tangzhou and Dangzhou to drive straight toward Bianliang. The western route set out from Sichuan to march into Guangzhou. In the 5th month of that year, the commander of the eastern route, Guoni, ordered Zaiyu to join Commander Chen Xiaoqing in capturing Sizhou. Previously unknown, Zaiyu at last, in his 60s, gained the chance to show his skill on the battlefield against the Jin. He volunteered eagerly to serve as vanguard, yet his first task was extremely perilous. First, it was not a large-scale siege, so Guoni only assigned him 87 death-defying warriors. To attack a whole city with less than 100 men was unimaginably difficult. Second, the plan of the Song army to attack Sizhou had leaked. Before Zaiyu and his men set out, the Jin were already prepared, closing the markets and shutting the gates. Learning that the plan was exposed, Zaiyu adjusted immediately. He advanced a day earlier than planned, leading his men across the Wye River to the foot of Shizhou. Shizhou was divided into east and west cities. Zaiyu ordered several brightly decorated warships to sail boldly before the west city, pretending to prepare another assault. Meanwhile, he himself led several dozen men along a steep mountain path, secretly reaching the south side of the east city. While the Jin defenders focused on the warships, Zaiyu and his men climbed the walls silently, swiftly killing the guards. His soldiers followed closely, suddenly launching a fierce attack. The defenders, caught off guard, were cut down by the hundreds. The survivors fled in panic through the north gate. Seizing the city, Zaiyu raised the Song banner above the east wall and ordered his men to shout toward the west city, "General Bai of the Great Song is here. All you people of the Central Plains may quickly surrender." This psychological tactic worked. The county magistrate defending the west city, originally a Han, yielded under the pressure and soon surrendered. At his first battle, Zaiyu displayed the qualities of an excellent commander, both the stratagems of planning and the valor of fighting at the front. The Battle of Sizhou, opening the Kaishi Northern Expedition, was won with hardly any losses. When Guoni heard the news, he rejoiced, personally went to reward Zaiyu, and even bestowed upon him the imperial title of assistant prefect. Though nominal, it was still an official rank. Yet Zaiyu declined again and again, saying, "The state has 81 prefectures in Henan. If now we take but 2 cities and I receive such an honor, how will I be rewarded for greater deeds?" The victory at Suzhou made the previously unknown Zaiyu instantly famous, and this was only the beginning of his miraculous feats on the battlefield. After the first victory, Guoni sent his brother Guozhuo, deputy commander of Qijiu, together with officer Li Ruyi to join forces and attack Suzhou. At the same time, he ordered Zaiyu to lead 480 cavalry as vanguard northward to attack Suzhou. Yet Guozhuo and Li Ruyi did not succeed at Suzhou. Continuous summer rains flooded the lowlands, but Suzhou, built on higher ground, remained secure while the Song army camped outside the walls. The Song army camp had turned into a swamp. After 10 years of campaigning, the southern troops of Liao descent were exhausted and weary. At this time, the Jin soldiers seized the chance to sortie from the city. The southern Song army, mired in wind and rain, floundered in the mud, its formations in chaos. Guozhuo, leading his troops in panic, also heard that Jin reinforcements were approaching. In haste, he fled eastward at night toward Lingbi. The victorious Jin cavalry immediately pursued with 5,000 horsemen close at their heels. At the same time, as the Song forces were being defeated at Suzhou, Zaiyu, who was under orders to march north to Suzhou, happened to meet Guozhuo's routed troops near Lingbi, northwest of Suzhou. After learning what had happened, Zaiyu did his best to reassure Guozhuo, saying, "Victory and defeat are common in war," and urged him to hold fast to Lingbi and resist together. But the routed soldiers were like startled birds, without any fighting spirit, refusing persuasion and insisting on fleeing far away. At this moment, Zaiyu, as a detached force, could have withdrawn to preserve himself. But he realized the Jin pursuers were close behind, and if the road were left open, the main Song forces ahead would also be doomed. Time was short, and Zaiyu made a decisive choice. He ordered his men to cover the retreat, personally leading his troops to stand against 5,000 Jin cavalry, shielding the withdrawal of the larger Song force to the south. Zaiyu placed 20 volunteers to guard Lingbi's north gate, while he himself led the remaining 400 horsemen to charge headlong into the vast ranks of Jurchen cavalry. The life and death struggle at Lingbi unfolded under the blazing summer Sunday. Zaiyu, leading from the front, rode out astride a magnificent jet-black steed, his own hair completely white. Wielding twin sabers, he seemed like a heavenly warrior descending to earth. The Jin soldiers had not expected that. At a moment when the entire Song army was collapsing, such a fearless and unyielding force would counterattack. A sense of dread took hold. Behind Zaiyu, dust rose in clouds, sand shook the skies, and for a time the Jin soldiers lost their bearings, their hearts thrown into disorder. As the saying goes, on a narrow road, the brave prevail. Zaiyu charged directly into the enemy ranks, cutting down foes madly. Slashing left and right, his armor and garments were drenched, red with blood. Though he suffered multiple wounds, he fought on with even greater ferocity. His men, inspired by his example, also fought like demons. The Jin troops suffered heavy casualties, their morale collapsed, and they fled northward. Zaiyu then pressed the pursuit for over 30 li before finally returning to Lingbi. Yet, because the Song army had already suffered a crushing defeat at Suzhou, the Jin main force might at any moment exploit their momentum to march south, and the plan to attack Suzhou had to be abandoned. The urgent task now was to withdraw safely to Suzhou under the enemy's watchful eyes. After securing victory at Lingbi, Zaiyu immediately ordered the city garrison to evacuate first, then commanded that Lingbi itself be set aflame. His men were puzzled, why not wait for nightfall to burn the city? But this was precisely Zaiyu's brilliance. Burning a city at night would expose the empty defenses under firelight. Burning it in broad daylight, however, filled the sky with choking smoke, and the beaten enemy, fearful of a trap, dared not approach to investigate. Thanks to Zaiyu's firm resolve, the Jurchen vanguard, already shaken, dared not rashly attack. During the retreat, Zaiyu had drums placed in the empty camp. He tied goats so their hind legs were bound high, while their forelegs were set on drum surfaces. Struggling, they constantly struck the drums, producing a thunderous sound like battle formations in motion. Seeing the Song army's strange ruse, with war drums sounding endlessly, the Jin troops hesitated, watching from a distance. When at last the drumming ceased and they stormed the camp, they found it empty, with only a few dying goats left behind. By this ingenious stratagem, Zaiyu withdrew safely, returning to Suzhou without loss. Because of his deeds in the northern expedition and his later series of remarkable performances, Zaiyu was promoted 23 ranks in succession by the Song court, rising from Wujilang to the office of Wui Dafu. Yet with the defeat at Suzhou, the Kaishi Northern Expedition suffered a major reversal. The eastern route's offensive against the Wai River region collapsed completely. At the same time, the central forces attacking Hangzhou and Kaizhou also suffered repeated setbacks, with heavy losses. On the western front, Wu Shi, charged with defending Sichuan and Shu, betrayed the dynasty in the third year of Kaishi, bringing disaster to Suzhou. These blows left the southern Song's position on the battlefield even more precarious. The Jin gathered more than 300,000 troops, launching counterattacks on 3 routes, forcing the northern expedition to shift from early full-scale offensive to strategic defense. In June and July of 1206, the only success of the Eastern Front, the capture of Suzhou, had to be strategically abandoned because it was isolated north of the Huai River. Zaiyu then stationed his forces at Shuyi, south of the Huai. In November of that year, Jin forces crossed the Huai and surrounded the prefecture of Chuzhou. The court immediately ordered Zaiyu to march from Shuyi with 7,000 troops to relieve the siege. At this time, the Jin army, numbering 70,000, pressed on Chuzhou. Knowing the disparity in strength, Zaiyu pondered deeply how to strike a decisive blow. Through repeated reconnaissance, he finally discovered the enemy's weak point. Their supplies were stored at Huaiyin, about 30 li northwest of Chuzhou, guarded by only 3,000 men. With relatively loose defenses, Zaiyu seized the opportunity. Zaiyu then sent death-defying warriors carrying fire, who at night took the mountain path north past Chuzhou, quietly reaching Huaiyin. At the second watch, they raised the signal and set fire to the Jurchen grain carts. In the darkness, sudden flames burst out everywhere. The Jin army, not knowing the truth, also heard the shouts from Suzhou echoing like thunder, and in panic they fled. Thus, the Jin provisions at Huaiyin were burned to nothing. The night raid on Huaiyin was a success, yet the situation in Lianghuai remained grave. At that time, the Western Jin army had crossed the Huai River, taken Haozhou and Tuzhou, and pressed into the stronghold of Liu He on the north bank of the Yangtze. The line of defense in Huai West was in dire peril. Zaiyu judged that the Jin was short of grain and for the moment could not mount a full-scale offensive. Chuzhou itself was well fortified and well supplied, so it could defend itself for a time. But Liu He, as the western shield of Jingling, if lost, would bring disastrous consequences. Seeing this, Zaiyu immediately marched to relieve Liu He. He had barely entered the city when the Jin vanguard arrived at Jushen, 25 li northwest of the walls. Seeing the Jin approach fiercely, Zaiyu ordered the troops to conceal banners and silence drums, placing ambushes outside the city and on the walls. Since the Jurchen had advanced south with unstoppable momentum, they assumed that Liu He would fall as easily. Yet, as they neared the moat, suddenly the roar of cannon sounded. Arrows rained down in a storm. The Jin soldiers, caught unprepared, fell in heaps. At the same moment, drums and gongs thundered from within, and the Song death squad surged out in force. The Jin were thrown into panic, unable to resist, and after heavy losses they fled. Although their vanguard was defeated, the Jin main force soon arrived, 100,000 strong, and surrounded Liu He. They launched fierce assaults through the night, while the Song stood in desperate defense. Supplies inside the city dwindled. At this point, Zaiyu devised another stratagem. In a lull, he ordered a light gauze umbrella raised on the walls, with straw men moving about beside it. The Jin saw this and believed the Song commander himself stood there. They rushed to shoot, and in a short time the walls were filled with arrows. After the battle, the Song collected them, gaining over 200,000 arrows without effort. By borrowing arrows with an umbrella, their shortage of munitions was temporarily eased. Yet the pressure of siege only grew. The Jin continued sending troops, building camps between Liuhe and Suzhou, stretching for dozens of li. Deeply surrounded, Zaiyu remained calm, ordering music to be played atop the walls to show ease. When the enemy pressed, he fought fiercely to repel them. When they slackened, he sent cavalry to raid outside. Repeated again and again, the Jin outside the city were tormented, unable to rest day or night, exhausted to the extreme. Finally, they prepared to retreat. Seizing the chance, Zaiyu boldly led all his main forces in a sudden attack. The Jin were crushed and pursued west to Chuzhou. Only when snow and rain hindered did Zaiyu bring his victorious army back. In December of 1206, the crisis of Liuhe was lifted, yet Chuzhou had been besieged for 3 months. Without rest, Zaiyu again marched to relieve it, dividing his forces to block the Jin. The siege was broken, Chuzhou freed. Afterwards, Zaiyu was concurrently appointed prefect and pacification commissioner of Huai East in Yangzhou. Early in Jiading, he quelled the rebellion in Wuxi, and Huainan gradually stabilized. The Jin commander Pusanku, who had directed the war, died of illness in camp. The situation began to shift in favor of the southern Song. But at court, the peace faction moved. The minister Shi Miyuan, together with Empress Yang, suddenly staged a coup, killed Han Tuozhou, and sent his head to the Jin as a token of peace. In the first year of Jiading, the southern Song increased tribute, giving an additional 3 million taels of silver to the Jin. Thus was concluded the Jiading peace treaty. The hasty northern expedition ended as a tragedy. In this tragedy, fortunately, there was still Zaiyu, a rare civil and military genius, who preserved some honor for the southern Song in defeat. After the Jiading Treaty, Song and Jin no longer fought, but Zaiyu, for whom this humiliating peace was unbearable, was filled with grief and anger. He requested repeatedly to retire, but Emperor Ningzong Zhaokuo would not allow it. In the 4th month of the 10th year of Jiading, the Jin again invaded. By then, Zaiyu was nearly 70, too aged to serve on the front. The court, grateful for his merits, appointed him military commissioner of Wuxin army with honors. Not long after, the great general passed away in Jiaxi of Huzhou at the age of 70.